ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery.
You know, I got lots of questions for you. I could sit here all day and ask you questions. But we thought of something that would be a little different, and that was not to go out on the street, not to go into schools, but to ask some of your fellow astronauts what their question to you would be.
No,
so,
really?
Yeah, so I want
they
you to...
They remembered me, did they?
They absolutely do. So I want you to watch this. Bob Thirsk is the first one.
Roberta, hypothetically, if a Mars human exploration mission were to be launched in the near future, and our international partners invited Canada to participate, what role would you recommend for our nation in that extraordinary mission?
Mars. Now, I've heard you talk about Mars.
Well, I guess there's a tongue-in-cheek one and a reality one. The tongue-in-cheek one is that they've been talking about sending couples into space. I've always felt it should be a Canadian lawyer that goes. But I think really, because we're always peacemakers, right?
Yeah.
And the other role I think that's really important, and certainly Bob has been the longest staying Canadian on space station, and he is a physician. He knows quite well what needs to be done, is the aspect of medical care in space. And I think that because we have this background in engineering, that's a great thing to have. But I think that long-term spaceflight, there are going to be things that we have to deal with, whether they're psychological or whether they're really deep medical issues. It would be kind of nice to have a Canadian physician on board. I think that's my bias. If I have Marc here, he'd probably think it was engineering in case some widget got broken. It's easier to teach engineering, I think, than to teach medicine. But that's my bias.
But you know, that's not going to be cheap to go to Mars. Is it worth the money?
I think in the long run it will be. My feeling has always been that instead of space station, we should have gone directly to the moon. By now we would have had laboratories. We would have been able to have the experience of what we need in terms of communication systems. We'd have a better, instead of putting people at the bottom of an ocean as aquanauts, we'd have people really on the moon to stage these things. And I think before we go to Mars, we really have to look at that. And I think that people who go to Mars should have some proper training and experience in space. And in terms of longer duration flights, I just don't think space station provides us all the answers to be able to go to Mars in a safe, ethical manner.
Let's see who's next. Chris Hadfield.
Roberta, a question, if you will. Where do you think Canada and Canadians should explore next?
Well, explore as opposed to go back to. Mm-hmm. So what would the answer be?
Is that a space explorer or Earth explorer?
I think, well, Chris.
Yeah.
Space
Speak
Earth.
to us, Chris. Seriously, if he meant space, then I think that I'd still go for the moon first, and I think that's a reasonable thing. If it was,
and when you say go to the moon, you say go to the moon and live on the moon.
Live on the moon and explore the moon. Have science laboratories that won't have to come down in another 5 years. That there can be international collaboration because it's going to be expensive to go to Mars. So I think that when we look at what we're going to explore next, I think there are questions we have to ask ourselves. What are we gaining by that exploration? It usually has to be something that's of value to us as a life form. I mean, if it was a general question about exploration, I'd say the oceans and the Arctic are very important areas for us to understand more about the life cycles on our planet and our ecosystems. If it was off the planet, I'd say, hey, the direction is up. So I think maybe going to the moon first would be a great thing. Many, many things to find out about bone loss, etc. So I harp back on space medicine, but hey, we're living cells sort of glued together, and it's very important that we understand what radiation effects are going to bother us on the way to Mars.
All right, let's see who's here. This is Jeremy Hansen. He's in Texas, one of our current astronauts who hasn't been up yet, but is very excited to go. So let's see what his question is.
Rapidly evolving space technology is creating an excitement in the air as we realize more Canadians will be flying in space in the future. And so my question for you, Dr. Bondar, is what advice would you give us, future explorers, to prepare ourselves to make the most of that incredible experience?
It's the answer for me is one that I give for many things I've been asked about, and that's how I become an astronaut, etc. I think we have to keep our curiosity that we've had since we were young. Otherwise, it becomes very flat. So to have the three-dimensional experience and the excitement, we really have to embrace, I think, all areas of education. And people may think this is a nutty answer, but if we stick just to science and technology, we really miss a lot of the ability to add creativity to that science and technology. And I think in terms of arts, I think in terms of diversity of language, interpersonal skills, all the things we need to cross cultures, things that we need to be able to get along, not just on international missions, but going forward in life on whatever system it's going to be, whether it's Earth, the Moon, or Mars, or beyond. I think that's how we'll develop a better base of enjoyment.
All right, it's the last one, and it's perhaps next to you from the most famous astronaut we've had, and that, of course, is Marc Garneau. Here he is.
One of the things that I noticed after my flight in 1984 is that occasionally I would dream about being back in space, I guess because it was now part of my experience. And so, Roberta, my question to you is, since your flight 25 years ago, have you had dreams where you're back in space?
I have had dreams where I'm back in space. They've been quite extraordinary, and they've been in Technicolor too, not in black and white. And they're very, very interesting because they combine things that I either have seen on television that other people are doing, or things that I felt that I've wanted to do when I was in space, or felt that I still could do, or they vault towards some other aspect of something that's either been an motion picture or the idea. And they've been quite interesting. None of them really has awakened me from sleep looking for the exit sign, or thinking that I'm going to float off my bed, or worrying about the bad food or the bad bathroom. But most of it's been about the excitement about exploration, the excitement about discovery, and the excitement about pushing the frontiers, about being out there, not necessarily the ego part of being the first to do something. That's not it. It's the idea of being able to, with fresh eyes, and it doesn't have to be as the first person who does it, but as oneself looking at something with a new vision, because only an individual can bring that new vision. We all have a new vision of something. We all have a new experience when we see it.